You're listening to Word Talk with Click, Scribble, and Scrawl, the Stetit cousins, where even in the script notes that you'll never see, we use the serial comma. How's everybody today?
We are here. I'm here.
You're here.
It's a beautiful
day. I gotta let you guys know. Some of you may have been here for Word Talk number 1, which started out with me talking about a problem I was having, and it's solved. Partly from the things that all the smart people said, partly from this, but what I discovered was if your plot is stuck, because how should I put this? What was going on was that I was having a conflict between wanting a significant major event to occur and the question being, yeah, but I'm writing a series and this is early in the series. Why hasn't that major event had any effect for all those other books? And what I ended up with is, oh, that's what the book is about. That is now the central problem of the book, is exactly, dealing with that. So yeah, if you're stuck on a thing, make that the sometimes that thing is the point. Yes, exactly. Sometimes, yes. Not always.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's some good news, and Word Talk has done me good. So thank you.
Yay. And yes, if you say this is a life-changing event, well, if it's that life-changing, that's the point. I like that. That makes sense.
You'll see when we can finally get together and when I have finally finished the thing, which I'm now thinking I might actually do. God, chapter 10 on this book was agony. It took forever. 11 much better.
Yeah, to go back a second to your point, Steve, we might at some point want to talk about the advantages of having a narrative conceit, because it's much easier to play that game with a first-person narrator of the, why didn't I tell you something before that I am telling you now? But it's not limited to first person, that if you have a conceit for your third person narration,
right. Yeah, so the whole issue of the conceit behind the book, of the what's the narrator's agenda, even if it's omniscient third person, those are all just beautiful things because they can add. They're one of the things I tell people to fall back on if you're stuck for what happens next. That's a thing to think about, and help you get unstuck, is because there's sometimes a lot of stuff in there when you start digging around and go, well, why is this story even being told?
And a similar thing for thinking about, writing classes are always talking about, what is your theme? What is your theme? I never know what my theme is when I'm starting to write. But one of the things that I've discovered is if there's a cool thing that I want to try, sometimes that turns out to be a window into theme. There's a movie that Will and I want to rewatch sometime very soon, and it's The Player. Robert Altman directed it. I ought to remember the writer. I feel very, very guilty that I don't
Might be Tim Robbins, but I'll have to check that.
And it's this movie about big, self-absorbed Hollywood. The entire first, I forget how many minutes, is the camera looking at this person and looking at that person and looking at this person. And after a while you realize, was this thing cut at all? And in the process of this shot, there are people talking about this director who did this really fancy scene in which there were no cuts. that director is not Robert Altman, it's some other famous director, but at the same time, you're watching this damn scene in which there are no cuts. And you know that Altman is going, this is awesome, this will be really fun. Oh, and we'll put a self-referential thing in there to a scene with no cuts. And that's really one of the things the movie is about, is that kind of, can we get away with this? Oh, sure, they'll let us do anything. And that's, you watch
Does
this
the book
movie and
have
find
to
out
have
that's
a
what it
theme,
is.
we are asked?
Well, okay, I kind of compared those few minutes at the beginning of the movie to, in fact, To Reign in Hell by Steven Brust. Oh, sorry, you were drinking. I apologize. Because in a lot of ways, that opening few minutes, that opening scene, that opening, in this case, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, is in a way saying, just how omniscient are we? And what can we get away with? And why would we want to? Is that fair? Steve didn't care if it's fair.
Well, then
fair?
I'm going to get I am going to
be
instantly
fair.
get my revenge
Oh, good.
in talking about theme and give you a quote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, somebody asked, do you need a theme? I would say it helps, and I would say if you don't have a theme, you probably do have a theme, you just don't know what it is, and it might not be something you agree with.
That was why I was going to suggest that, to say, you don't have to have a theme for your first draft, but boy, is it useful for your second.
That's true too, but I was
That's
going
also
to
why you have to learn about tropes, because if you don't know about the trope, you're going to get stuck in it.
the oh, and that brings up,
Or at least it's very embarrassing when somebody says,
bring me back to that about rules of writing. But I want to come back to this quote, one of my absolute favorites, which is, when you figure out the theme of your book, don't say it. That was said by, let me think, Emma Bull.
Really?
Yeah. At a Scribble meeting.
Pretentious asshole who writes that elfy wealthy fantasy?
No, worse. I didn't have to write it down.
It is okay to put it in your title.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I love books. I can't think of any examples, but I love books
Oh, like Freedom in the City?
where you get to the end and then you notice the title of the book and it completely redefines what you've read. I've seen that more in short stories, and I can't think of examples, but I love that so much. Does anybody who is listening, any of the audience, are you stuck on anything in a story?
Yes,
That's really
ask us a question.
Ask us a question. That's the main thing we're here for.
Make us work.
I do have two things for you. One of them more useful than the other.
All right.
No one seems to have anything in chat. I assume they'll jump up and tackle me if they do.
Okay.
So do you want the thing that's useful for you to discuss, or the thing that will merely be useful to me and not at all useful for your discussion?
What's the thing that's useful to you?
First of all, we want the thing that's useful to you, but as Will said, but Clicks said, I don't
Your
remember.
click.
Scrawl. Your click.
Scrawl said. But I wanted to come back to that one thing, make a really brief point, which is that's the importance of rules of writing. Is with many of those rules, if you aren't aware of them, you will follow them. I remember when I was studying songwriting, and it wasn't until someone pointed out that the proper form for a song is verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, that I went, oh my God, I've been doing that. I've got to stop doing that. And until I was made consciously aware of it, I just followed it.
But one of the reasons why you do that, and it's a healthy reason, is because you're already interested in the form. You're already interested in songs. In my case, already interested in novels and storytelling. And you read enough of these and you know what a novel sounds like. You know what a novel reads like.
Right.
You know
Right.
what the end of a chapter feels like because you've read a lot of chapters and they end like a chapter. And so it's not so much that you're aware of the rules as you're aware of the sound of the rules. You're aware of the effect the rules have.
Yeah, and usually you don't, you're
Yeah.
not completely aware of how the rules work. So you end up coming up with poems that rhyme, but the scansion is way off. You know, you 3/4 understand the things that you have not analyzed. One of my rants that I don't think I've done yet on the show is too many people hear about rules of writing and they think that they're laws of writing, and they're not laws of writing.
They're more guidelines.
They're guidelines, yeah. You know, there are things that you go, this is something that you works 95% of the time. It's a thing that's handy sometimes when you're stuck. It's a thing, but it's not a thing that you shouldn't break. It's a thing that you should break knowing that you're breaking it.
Don't step in that swampy area. Oh, unless you want tadpoles. And if you want tadpoles, the only way to do it is to step in the swampy area. Bring a jar. Yeah.
And,
If
well,
you're
and
going
by the way,
to
you
put chili in
mentioned
your hot chocolate, you should know why.
If you're going to put what in your hot chocolate?
Chili.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Emma, you made a reference, and I just have to mention this because it's one of my favorite factoids. Made a reference to that thing of the feel of the end of a chapter.
Mm.
And I am actually playing with that quite a bit right now because I've started a new version of the book and things have shifted around. So I'm very aware of, oh, this is now the end of the chapter. I've got to do a thing. Does anyone know who the first writer to start that was? The first one who started the custom of end a chapter with a punch. Can anyone name that writer?
No.
Dumas.
Ah,
Are you
Isn't
sure?
that-
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
and then that guy walked in with a gun.
Well, I mean, you look at it as sort of like the very last line of the point where the Duke of Buckingham, our attention is now on the Duke of Buckingham, and he goes, and his servant or his retainer or whatever is talking to him, and he says, "Thank you, Felton." End of chapter. And if you know enough history to know that Buckingham is assassinated by Felton, you go, oh my God.
I've got a
you had a
counter
thing.
example, and then we should maybe get back to like the questions that are coming up, which is the Arabian Nights. The whole structure is ending on cliffhangers.
Yeah, cliffhanger is different than a punch.
Ah. Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Oh, and I would
Well,
like to
again-
mention, James pointed out that Michael Tolkien is the writer of The Player.
Yes. And Steve,
Thank you, James.
asked
asked you what's the difference between
Well,
a
I
punch?
mean, a cliffhanger is generally implies a serial, and it's like one of those TV shows we all hate, where the last show
Or
of the
sometimes.
series doesn't resolve things. It's sort of like it's the chord before the resolution chord.
Well,
One
yeah, a
that
cliffhanger
really-
withholds payoff.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly, Jen.
Say
A
that again?
cliffhanger withholds payoff. A punch is a payoff.
Yeah, but often a punch is a minor payoff.
Usually
yeah.
a minor. Yeah, usually
Yeah.
a minor payoff. Jen, you had a thing you wanted to talk about.
I have two things for you. So do you
And
want the
only
good news or
one
the
that
bad
was
news?
about you.
Okay, give us yours, and then somebody had like a question from his girlfriend, and I'm always a sucker for questions from
Yes.
Oh,
Justin
yeah, the
did.
question from the girlfriend was, what were the two things I was going to say?
Oh, okay.
It's a little
Full
recursive.
circle. I like that.
It's a little
Thank you.
recursive, so we like
Thank you,
that.
Justin's girlfriend.
Yes.
Yeah.
We like girlfriends here too. Okay, so this is actually related to my dad, who was texting me just before we got going. My dad is looking for a new name for his photography stuff, which is mostly vintagey stuff and some pinup stuff. And he goes, Jen, you're creative. You have lots of those literary type friends. Help a brother out.
So, Jen, I was thinking about that, and they live in Red Lion, Pennsylvania, and I realized from his point of view, it wouldn't be imaginative, but Red Lion Photography is actually a pretty cool name.
It is a cool name, but he does want it to be less attachable to his work identity.
Okay, do we have any? Okay, we are now being asked to do titles, which is something we haven't done before, but I kind of like it. Do we have anything besides Red Lion? Okay, not Red Lion, because that exposes the author's pseudonym, so we don't want to do that.
Right.
We have vintage, and we have pinup.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Anything mid-century modern or photography related is cool.
Vintage roar.
Vintage roar?
Just to think, you know.
You get a nice leopard print logo.
Mm. There is a lot to be said for fairly obvious titles. When I was younger, I used to think that titles had to be like really clever, and I love clever titles. I'm not knocking
Cat's
that.
Meow. Cat's Meow photography.
I like that.
That's nice.
That's nice.
I'm not even going to bother to write these down. I'm just going to tell Dad that he should watch the thing.
Oh, but yeah, your dad should watch this anyway. Why isn't your dad already watching this?
I mean, maybe he already does.
If your dad did a podcast, I would watch his podcast because your dad is cool.
He is cool.
He is cool.
He is cool. Hey, we have an actual story issue question.
Oh yes, let's jump on it.
Okay, Robert, if I ask you to unmute, will you be able to unmute and just ask that question using your words and your voice?
Robert's voice.
Okay. I might be unmuting, Robert.
Sitting on my patio, so hopefully it's not too windy.
Yes.
Oh, I can't even hear the wind.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Good. So I guess sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
So my current issue is that I've been working on. It's horror, well, kind of dark fantasy, but I have it outlined, but like I've always had problems with middles, and the first probably half almost of the book works really well, and I have the end all sorted out, and then in the middle I have probably to make the book like 80K long. I have like 20 or 30,000 words to like put in, and I have kind of a couple of ideas, but it just seems like it's forced. But books, everybody seems to want long books these days. So
That's ridiculous. I've been thinking about lately about how great the classic era of the paperback was. You know, when basically people said 40 to 50,000 words, which is the kind of unit that you can sit down and you know, you can read it in an hour or two or three, depending on how fast. But you can basically
60,000 words means you're a pompous asshole.
So my gut says ignore that. Write it the way it feels right, and worry about editors later. Steve?
I absolutely agree with Will on that, and I will point out that if it ends up a novella, you will be in a position where you will have the devil's own time finding a market for it, but a real edge up on awards because there are hardly any novellas out there.
Like,
Somebody should do a magazine that's dedicated to novellas.
well, it would be easy enough to do on a webzine, say.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But-
And let me ask you another one, Paul. is this the sort of setting, character, or whatever that would lend itself to two somewhat related novellas, or maybe three? I am just such a big fan of let the story find its own length, as you know, as Will said. I am a huge fan of that. And if you could maybe tie a couple together with the same character or same setting or whatever, then you can deal with the marketing problem without twisting your story out of shape.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, the theme of this one is more like King in Yellow type horror, kind of pulp, dark fiction kind of thing. So yeah, probably.
I would try that. Try letting it find its own length, resolve things as they feel natural. Marissa Lingen came up with the term writer proprioception, which is such a lovely way of putting it. It's you get a feel for the story needs to be here. You get to a certain point, and those are some of the frustrating times where I'm going, you know, yeah, but it just doesn't feel right yet. I have to have a thing happen, or these things will be too close together, and that will feel wrong. Be guided by that, rather than a market thing of length, by how it feels.
And I think particularly with horror and dark fantasy, a reader can tell if you're treading water. If you are kind of going, yeah, it needs to be that long. When I think about the work of people like Shirley Jackson, who said, all right, this leads to this, this leads to this. You don't hold off on that event, that revelation, that feeling of this is moving strongly. You get there when you get there. And I really think that that's something that a good dark fantasy writer really understands.
There's also something
that you don't keep the reader waiting.
Yeah, there's also a bit of advice that I give very cautiously, which is you shouldn't always listen to what editors say they want. I am remembering, oh come on, what's his name? Books of Blood were his first three books.
Clive Barker.
Clive Barker, thank you. Those were three books of short stories that if I remember correctly, they weren't previously published as short stories. He basically sat down and said he wanted, I hope I'm not like making this up, but my memory is that he sat down and he wrote a bunch of short stories, and then he submitted them as collections to publishers, and the publishers were happy to take them, because basically from a publisher's point of view, they go, all right, you want to be able to market something as a unified thing. The problem with collections of short stories in general is that readers look at that and they go, this is going to contain some stories that I don't like, therefore I'm better off getting a novel. In general, novels are a slightly more practical thing for that reason. But if you can figure out a way to get around that preconception by finding a way to unite the short stories, all's good. And the Barker story somehow did that by that great title, Books of Blood. Things like the Conan stories got sold as these are books with a whole bunch of stories about Conan.
They were first sold in places like Weird Tales.
Yeah, but what really made Conan was in the 1960s when they were released as paperbacks of Conan stories. It's, people had generally forgotten the Weird Tales stories. The magazine sales were very were practical for Howard, but in terms of the, why do we know the character?
Lynn Carter collected them later.
Yeah, exactly.
And going back to what Emma Uh-oh, I just blanked on what Emma said. I had a whole thing about what Emma said, but now I don't remember what Emma said. What did Emma say,
Even
Emma?
Emma doesn't remember what she said.
Yeah.
Emma remembers what she said. Jen, what did Emma say?
I was lining up the next question, but
Next
the person,
question.
chats. So yeah. Anyway, so moving on. Okay, this is tongue in cheek, but I'm
Right,
expecting
I
We'll
a
watch
real
the YouTube
question.
later and remember what I said.
I remember now. She was talking
He remembers now.
about readers' notice when you're
Putting water.
putting in filler.
Yeah.
The moment I stopped reading Piers Anthony was one of the incarnations of immortality books. I think either the second or the third, I don't remember. And I kept hitting these spots where I was going, this doesn't belong here. Why is this even here? This is irritating. This is filler. Brr. And then, which was minorly annoying, okay? But then I got to the end and he has an afterword in which he talks about how when he finished the book, it wasn't long enough. So he added this scene and this scene and this scene and this scene to fill it out. And they were every one of the ones that I've been getting irritated at. And that's the last Piers Anthony I've read.
And you thought we wouldn't notice. Oh.
Okay, we have another question?
Okay, so like I said, this is a little tongue in cheek. So somebody, in response to one of your tweets advertising this, Steven, said the following. I have one set before the Civil War about an orphan and a slave running away together. The story problem is they should be escaping north, but they're on a raft that's taking them further and further south. Okay, so here's the actual question for you all that I'm going to extract out of that, which is amusing. That's funny because we know the historical context of that. It's funny, it's a joke. So if you're writing something in a secondary world that's got its own history that you have to completely invent, how do you invent that sort of quirk of history that everybody knows and then sprinkle that in there in a way that's believable without doing My Father the King?
Well, that's the whole joy of secondary world fantasy, is that you get to find ways to do that. I mean, that's the exciting part is you're going, I want to make a reference to an historic event that everybody in this world knows about and my readers don't, and I have to convey enough information that the reader won't be annoyed by it. How do I do that? And solving that in each case is the fun of secondary world fantasy.
For you.
Yeah. I think it's perfectly legit to start off with second world fantasy in which all the sources of inspiration are obvious. That you're able to say that's a very thinly disguised XYZ, and you actually expect the reader to get it.
So like Jekyll and Carey.
I could probably come up with a long list without too much trouble. But when you do that, I think you're obliged to very quickly veer away, to sort of say, now that we've set this up, our second world fantasy, we are going to very, 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 very quickly move so far away that you can't expect any of the following things to be like the following things in the world we know. I first noticed this with
These are Burgundians, but they aren't your Burgundians.
Well, not just the Burgundians, but I
they're not true Burgundians?
Well, no. They can be true Burgundians, but what happens to them cannot be anything like what happened in Burgundy, because of this element that you've introduced has got to very quickly take you to a different track. I read a story that I think it was science fiction set in the future, that was very faithful to the French to the French Revolution, and it was rather admired at the time. And I found it annoying as hell because I was kind of going, well, yeah, you know, either write about the French Revolution or don't give me this slightly dressed up version of it. You know, if they had said, all right, Thomas Paine comes to France during the French Revolution and he's like struck by a meteor and, you know, can burn people alive now, you know, I would have said, oh, that's cool. You know, I don't mind that you're giving us a thinly disguised version of the French Revolution.
Why are you doing that to me?
Else. You know.
Will, that was actually actively painful.
Yeah.
That hurt. Thomas Paine struck by a meteor, and now we can. No.
Don't do that. Don't do that. I mixed that drink. I know there's something weird in it.
Okay.
All right. Suddenly there was dead air. Jen, do we have enough? Did we answer your question? Did we help on that? Oh, wait.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really want help, but I just wanted to give you a topic to talk about. I don't
Totally
really
right
have
that
more,
that was the least bit helpful. Yeah.
do we have more questions from our audience? Because it is questions from you, the audience, that brings our show to life. Or you can throw meteors on us and kill us all. But to do
That
so,
also
you have to
works,
ask questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, it's
Did
very...
we a question from what's that one?
Are we talking about the ghost of the Uber driver?
That was a response to a tweet I made. Apparently, there is an urban legend in New Orleans that there are ghosts that get into taxi cabs.
And there are parts of town where you can expect to have a ghost get in your taxi cab.
Yeah, and the problem is that they then can't pay for the ride. And so my immediate reaction
they do.
was, okay, well, someone needs to write the ghost in the Uber driver.
Yeah.
But it's someone whose name is not Steve.
He's a ghost. She's an Uber driver.
They
Together.
Yeah.
But can the ghost of the Uber driver be the name of my dad's photo studio?
The ghost in the Uber driver. No,
There might be
probably not.
trademark issues. Yeah, no. Okay. I just had to check. It's just asking.
Jen, you said you had 2 questions. Have you asked them both?
I have indeed.
That other one? Okay, just check.
I have indeed. I wanted to spin that joke
Erica
answer
has a good one.
question.
Did you see Erica's Ghost in the Lens? I like that.
Another
Sounds
ghost title? Yeah.
So how's writing going for you 2?
Writing?
Oh, wait, we had something about staying true to myth. Somebody had a thing about staying true to myth.
Aha, Justin's girlfriend. Justin's girlfriend.
Okay, can you? I only saw part of it on the screen.
We may have to retitle this Justin's Girlfriend.
Yeah. Justin's Girlfriend would actually be a good title for your dad's business.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
You know, that would really bring things complete. So there you go, Dad. That's your new Instagram name, is Justin's Girlfriend. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Also, I have...
Sorry, Justin, and Justin's girlfriend.
All right, good.
Yeah.
So what was the question from Justin's girlfriend?
Okay, she has sent us a link. I'm attempting to press the button to ask her to unmute. But either my computer doesn't like me, or Zoom doesn't like us, or something.
I know Zoom doesn't like me.
How faithful does one need to be in rewriting history or Greek myth? Wow, that's a really tough one to answer in the abstract. It's sort of a case-by-case basis. Speaking
Good
as
question, though. It's one of those questions that
It is a good question.
you ask yourself when you're starting that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of
speaking as
because
someone
it's-
whose favorite writer is Zelazny, I think you get to be loose and free with myth.
Yeah, but I think it's one of the things that you do ask yourself when you're starting out. You're saying, okay, is the fun for me in this going to be staying really true to history, to myth, or is the fun raising holy hell with history or myth?
kind
Okay,
of related
okay.
to something that we haven't discussed, which is the secret history. You can do faithful myth as though it were secret history. Sort of this is a myth that would fit in with the traditional myths in a way that would be plausible to people who are familiar with this, but it's one that for some reason got lost. And I think that's a fine way to play the game.
In fact, tremendous amounts of fun. I mean,
Yeah, essentially.
it's one of the things that I'm doing.
Yeah, so in her story, she wants to redeem.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, she wants to redeem Aphrodite and her lovers. And man, speaking as a reader, I would like to see people go all sorts of places with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very cool to me. I would say that, let me formulate this as a general rule. The more thoroughly you've researched the myth or the history, the more liberties you are free to take with it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can see that because you know why it went the way it went.
Right,
Does that make sense?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And if somebody comes back at you and says, that's not the way the myth went, you say, no, and I'll tell you why.
Exactly.
And knowing
And
the context of something like Tam Lin and really getting into the research of that, just to like draw something randomly from example, gives you the authority to be able to, when you replace that in a more modern setting, for instance, it gives you the authority to go, this is why this is how we update this part of it, and this is how we update that other part of it, because you actually have the knowledge.
Exactly. Tam Lin by Pamela Dean is such a beautiful, beautiful example of how you do that right.
Yeah. Now, having spoken up for, doing your research and getting it right, the trap that a lot of people don't recognize is that once you start doing your research, in theory, it never ends. So you've got to have what right now I will title the Shakespeare out, which is to say, I know enough to tell a good story. I don't have to worry about whether or not the seacoast or the clocks are actually right, because
Delirium, motherfucker!
My story is not about seacoasts and it's not about clocks. Let me just see if I can kind of get you through the part about the seacoasts and the clocks to get you back on track to what's actually interesting here.
Well, that comes back to what another rule of writing, and one I quite like, which is I don't know a good way to say it. It comes down to, if you're counting the rivets on the boxcar, the train isn't moving fast enough.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. I like that. Yes.
But that just makes me think of the terrible movie version of Wild Wild West, which I actually like, and I know that all three of you will hate me for that.
Yes, but you're wrong.
But you're wrong. Don't make me think about what a good movie that could have been.
Yeah.
We're visited by a captain.
If
What
they
is it
kept the
like
cats
about that?
and found a new
Oh, a
writer.
cat butt.
Yeah.
A cat butt.
Yeah.
Hello,
So,
cat butt.
Jen,
Yes.
This
what
is
do
a space
you like
pirate
about-
kitty.
What do I like about that movie?
Yeah.
I think okay, it was easier for me to like it because I had never seen or really known about the existence of the show when it came out, which is when I first saw it. And it was just, I loved a couple of the actors in it. They all entertained me. The steampunk thing was still sort of fresh for me. So some of the gadgets and tropey things worked for me. It was entertaining. The humor hit for me. And even though it was objectively not like the greatest artistic movie, neither were any of the other movies that I loved from around the same time. You've got like Cutthroat Island and the other Gina Davis one that's modern and spy stuff.
Oh, I like that one.
Just fun things, like fun 90s movies.
Yeah. Now this is good because
Yes, thank you. Long Kiss Goodnight.
Yes.
oh yeah, we should see that
That
again.
one's so much fun. It doesn't stand up to close examination, but it doesn't need to.
Yeah. Yeah, if we wanted something to discuss in a future show, we could tackle the whole thing of objectively bad art that's a whole lot of fun and that's just fine.
Well, actually, if we're going to mention The Long Kiss Goodnight, it's a perfect example of the train is moving fast enough that the first few times we watch it, we aren't counting the rivets.
Yeah.
Yeah. The opposite version of that statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are virtues of bad art that sort of snobbish writers fail to appreciate. And
there are a lot of good questions about what are you expecting? I mean, one of the things that I was the Wild Wild West, the remake, the movie version of Wild Wild West is for me kind of like the movie version of Maverick. I knew what to expect, and that wasn't what I got.
Movie too.
You know, and if you don't know what to expect, the movie version of Maverick is a lot of fun. But I knew what I was expecting. I came in expecting something else. I had heard who was going to be in it. I had heard what, you know. Anyway.
You expected X.
Will
and you
Smith
got
is
Y.
awesome, is the
Yes.
thing. And
Will
if
Smith
he's
is
been given a
incredibly
better script. Rumble. But now I want a new version of the Wild Wild West that, if you remember the original TV show, President Grant appeared in it from time to time, and they could do a lot more with that now. That would be fun.
And Will Smith looks really good in tight pants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he does. He really does. All right, I think we are close to ready to wrap up, you guys.
I really think there's not much you can say after you say Will Smith looks really good in tight pants.
I mean,
Let's
I
check
think
to
that's
see if there's any
probably
last questions.
I think that's probably a great tagline for a future show.
I think so too.
Word talk with
Well,
click,
we have
Scribble,
learned a
Scrawl,
thing. We have learned that
reminding
Will
you.
Smith looks really good in tight pants.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing, you guys.
Yeah.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any final questions. Next time, maybe we'll come up with a topic in advance and then
There's a
also
lot.
give priority to any writing questions we've got.
That would be cool. Would people like it if we came up with a topic and then advertised that topic so people knew, you know, I don't want to talk about that. It could go away.
I thought about that.
That sounds interesting. Okay,
We
well,
have one person. We have two people saying yes in chat, so I think that's, you know, that's motioned and seconded.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, Word
Cat
Talk
likes
has
it.
been direct. Wait. Word.
Oh wait,
Word
hang on a
Talk-
second. Hang on a
Oh,
second.
oh,
I
oh, oh.
don't have my copy of the script, so Emma, why don't you do me?
I'm also doing me.
Yeah, I know. You can do a funny voice.
Okay, I'll do a funny voice. I'll do you in a funny voice. Very good.
Will,
Okay.
you did. How do you not have a copy of the script? Did you not prepare?
No.
Are we on the same page here?
Oh, I think Mrs. Pendergast. Straighten Mrs. Pendergast's headband, for God's sake. Be respectful.
Okay, Word Talk has been directed by Jen Phalion.
Recording engineer, Jennifer Slaw. Produced by Jen, the Mermaid Princess, in association with Squirrel Text Benders.
Emma is always going to do my voice from now on.
No.
Legit. Theme music was A Meaningful Dialogue, written by Neil Gaiman and performed by the Flash Girls.
Electrical design by Trippin' Breakers. Camera control by Lori Solution.
Sound engineering by Whitey Say.
Website maintenance by Bugsy Feature. The official Word Talk grammarian is ripping my hair out.
Wardrobe by Coates Duterre.
Voice coaching by Lucy Lipsenkoff. Transportation by Ollie Slick.
Fact checking by Verity Mostly.
Our folklore consultant is Lily Levin. Catering by Karen Feeding.
And don't read like my cousin.
Don't read like my cousin. Don't read like my cousin.
This has been a Building EPL production.
Yes, yes.